I'll let you in on a little secret. Reaching your revenue goal won't change your life, but hitting your profit goal, that absolutely will. If you want to build a life first business this year, you need to create more margin, both in your finances and in your schedule. If you're ready to double down on profit generating strategies that actually work so you can work 4-day weeks, go on real vacations, or even take the summers off, you won't want to miss this. In my free masterclass, Double Your Profit While Working Less, you'll learn exactly how to set your business up to scale so you can give yourself a raise, create a clear plan for how to work that dream schedule, and step into your CEO era, the one where you and your business aren't just surviving, but thriving. You can grab this free masterclass at www.jadeboyd.co/Double Your Profit Masterclass or go to the link in the show notes. Now back to the show.
The jury's still out whether or not everybody should use video, but I think everybody should use the standard pin format 100%. Those have been the flagship pins since it started. They'll continue on. And I just think if you really are mastering what is in that image, you're really going to succeed over time.
Welcome to the Business Edit Podcast, a podcast about redefining productivity for the modern woman in business and finding ways to work smarter, not harder, in business and life. I'm your host, Jade Boyd, an MBA, business minimalist, and productivity coach. I help overwhelmed business owners simplify and scale their service-based businesses by doing less but better. I help my clients create business minimalist strategies and systems that allow them to pursue ambitious goals while working at a human pace. On this podcast, we'll explore simple ways to grow your business with a life-first approach. If you're ready to scale your business, bring order to chaos, ditch the busy work, and spend more time living your life than managing your life, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Business Edit Podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Kate.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
I am really excited about this conversation because I feel like there's so much opportunity on Pinterest, but it's definitely one of those platforms that is not top of mind when it comes to marketing strategies for business owners and is a little bit ambiguous, a little bit mysterious. And so I'm really excited to dig in with you today about what's actually working in Pinterest marketing this year in 2024, because just like every other platform, it's changing. But I've also just valued learning from you for a long time from your podcast, and it's super fun to meet you in person. But for those of you who don't know you, would you mind giving a little bit more information about who you are and what you do, and honestly, like how you got started in Pinterest marketing in the first place?
Yeah. So I do Pinterest marketing. I sometimes think of myself as, it feels weird to say Pinterest expert, but I would say I'm also part like Pinterest historian. And it's been the only thing I've really studied and done in marketing. So if someone was to ask me about Instagram, I'd be like, I have no idea. I just know Pinterest, right? So I got into it back in 2013. I had been working for a friend who had a website with a frugal and deal blog, and she was leveraging Facebook, doing affiliate marketing, all of that. And that was right at the time we saw the first great social media change where a platform was turning off the organic traffic to turn on the optimization for ads so that they could essentially force you into buying traffic. And this was huge for creators at the time because that was where their source was. It was really, nobody was using Instagram at the time besides for personal. There wasn't a lot of business happening, but Facebook, the business pages were so good. It was like, and literally overnight, just off.
Mm-hmm.
And so that began this question of, okay, where can we go next? And even though Pinterest had, come on the scene probably 3 years earlier, people just saw it as a personal tool, or they weren't even using it yet. And so for them to leap from personal to business felt really big. A few people talking about it. And so when that change happened on Facebook, we said, okay, how can we go to Pinterest? And we watched a business webinar and we thought, oh, this actually will drive traffic because the nature of the platform is you click on an image and then you go to a website. And that's still the same way it is today. And so then through a series of personal issues and things like that, my husband couldn't get a job out of recession. She suggested that I start managing for people's Pinterest pages. And I thought, that's the dumbest idea. Nobody's going to do it. Nobody even cares. And she was like, well, you are out of options, so you should try this. So I did. I bought the domain Simple Pin Media, and really with that idea in mind of making it simple for business owners, because I knew that they had so much on their plate because I had been working for one. And so I tried with 3 beta clients and they loved it. And they thought, I'm going to tell my friends. And later that year, I realized I have a business. about Pinterest. And then now 10 years later, I've grown that into lots of different things, but really see that main core of what I do as helping people unpack how to do Pinterest in a way that is simple for them, in a
Mm.
way where they can really wrap their brains around it and go, yes, this is an option, or no, this isn't an option for me.
So, speaking about how much Pinterest has changed over the last few years, I oftentimes forget the very first time I signed up for a Pinterest account and how different it was and how different
Yeah.
I thought about the platform to what it is today. So, when we're thinking about Pinterest today, what types of business owners should even be thinking about being on Pinterest? Is it the kind of thing where certain niches or certain industries are going to perform a lot better, or business owners who have a certain amount of capacity to create content are in a better place to perform on Pinterest? Who's like the ideal business owner for Pinterest, or who should be thinking about investing in it the most?
Yeah, this is a great question because I think content creation is key for Pinterest. What we've seen in a lot of our data is that businesses that don't have a content creation flow don't do as well. And also, I never suggest it for a local. I would say like medical usually isn't good. Hair salons aren't always the best. But if you have an online component where you can use content to warm people up or you sell online products, whether physical or digital, that is definitely the place for you to be. And there is this common understanding of there's like the top 5 niches on Pinterest. It's food, DIY, decor, fashion, and home. And those and weddings, actually, like you're going to get the most traffic. But there are these underlying ones that while they don't get the same numbers, they might get a similar impact to where people on Pinterest are going and they're searching for this particular topic and they're finding it and they're learning about you that way. So I always tell people think about it in the sense of, are you going to create content that warms people up to who you are and what you do,
Mm.
kind of shows your expertise? That is key for Pinterest.
So, what is like the minimum required time and content creation
Mm,
to actually do well on Pinterest? Because for any business owner thinking about like, oh man, this is another content channel, even if they do have that regular workflow and are consistently creating content, it's a whole nother thing to repurpose it on another platform. And so I feel like the first question going through a lot of business owners' minds, other than is this actually going to work for me? Is it a good fit for my niche? Is like, how
mm,
much time is this actually going to take me? What do
mhm.
I really need to do to succeed? So, from your perspective, what do business owners really need to do to see results? Because you can't just like create a pin every other week and expect
Mm.
your business to change, right? But what does that look like?
Yeah, I would say the first thing I kind of want to like ask this person is how much time they're spending on Instagram or TikTok creating content. Because what I find is that people are already creating a lot of content and hours of it, but they're putting it on one platform. And what I think works for Pinterest the best is you have to pull that back and make your website the pillar of your content, and then everything else flows out from
Mm,
there. And so if we're dealing with a business owner that says, okay, I have a podcast or I have a blog or I have my website as the hub, then your workflow is really on that main circle part. It's like a bicycle wheel. It's in that main center, and that serves a lot of different areas. So if you have that in place and then you choose to add Pinterest, then what you're adding is image creation and then double checking keywords to make sure that that is working. And what we find is that somebody who's spending 12 hours a week on Instagram can spend at least 4 hours a week on Pinterest and sometimes get better results. 4 hours feels like a little bit much, but I do think that once you get into your groove, you can shorten it down, plus use a scheduling tool, things like that. But I think that's where that time frustration comes into play. And I get the pushback. But when I say, how many hours are you spending on Instagram? It's always so many more
mm.
than, what you really need to do.
So I love that you differentiated that the content hub has to be your website and not just necessarily all of the short form content. There has to be some higher strategy there, which ultimately boils down to your website. But also with Pinterest driving traffic, it does make a lot more sense to drive traffic to your website rather than to an Instagram post. But do you repurpose for your clients? Speaking of like the repurposing workflow, other than creating original content or repurposing like blog posts and stuff like that, do you post Instagram or TikToks to Pinterest too, or do they not perform as well?
We will sometimes if we have The best way is to do like raw edited is what we call it. So we'll never just take it directly from Instagram and then post it on Pinterest because you have the music and then you have all these other things. But if they give us like a raw form of an edited video where it doesn't have any captions or music to it, then we can upload it to Pinterest that way and use those native tools that Pinterest has, which every platform likes you to upload natively, right? Like they don't want to have it the watermark or repurposed. When it comes to video, though, video's having a weird moment where it was working really, really well. And then it's really hit or miss right now. We have some clients who are like killing it with video, and then others who video is tanking. And maybe their standard image, just a static image, is doing really well. So I think that's the thing where you have to try to see whether or not your users are engaging with video or they just like a standard pin image.
Why do you think that is, that video works for some people and not others? Are there specific
Yeah.
reasons where you think, especially for those clients that you're thinking about?
I don't know, actually. I was at a conference last week and it was interesting. There were 50 creators in the room. And one person was like, video's crushing it for me and I'm using my face. And someone's like, video's terrible for me and I'm using my face. And then someone's like, I'm doing hands and pans and things like that. So we can't yet find a reason why. And I don't know if it's attached to the keyword value of whatever's attached to that particular piece of content. Like if somebody sees it, that's not really what they're looking for.
Mhm.
Or if in general, I would say, here's a hypothesis, I guess, is that Pinterest users never like to feel invaded. Like it's their world. Whereas like when I go to Instagram, I'm going into tons of other people's worlds. When I go to Pinterest, I'm in my world and I want it on my
Mm.
terms. I want to search what I want. I am not interested in your life. I'm interested in, does your content answer my question? And so if it doesn't, if it's a teaser, if it's something I'm not interested in, then I'm going to scroll past it. So I don't know if for some of those people who are doing well with video, their hook is getting them in and people resonate with it versus the other people who aren't, or it's really an algorithmic thing that some of those aren't shown in that particular keyword. So we're not really able to find a solution right now. And it just
Mhm.
felt like it's happened in the last 3 months. It's really strange. So the jury's still out whether or not everybody should use video, but I think everybody should use the standard pin format 100%. I think those have been the flagship pins since it started. They'll continue on. And I just think if you really are mastering what is in that image, you're really going to succeed over time.
I think what you said just got to a really important point, which is true of any platform, really. The content that performs for one business owner is not going to perform for the next one for a variety of reasons. And so, whether we're talking about Pinterest or Instagram or blogging or podcasting, whatever we're talking about, there is no formula for like this type of content is going to perform the best because it is so custom based on what industry you're in and even your personality and what you're good at. Obviously, someone who's a great speak to camera person on Reels is going to perform better than somebody who feels really uncomfortable, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's important that you pointed that out. There's so much blanket advice given on like do A, B, and C when it comes to this platform. And this is how I did it. So if you do it, you're going to be so successful. But it's important to take that with a grain of salt and understand what works for your audience and your business might be a little bit different. But I do want to
Mm-hmm.
go back to you mentioned two types of pins, video pins and then static pins. Just for somebody who's newer to Pinterest, would you give an
Mm-hmm.
overview of like, okay, when we're talking about types of content for Pinterest, what are the categories?
The categories are video pin, standard pin, and product pin. And Pinterest they have been moving towards it, but it's like a simplified pin format to where it will just all be called a pin, right? But it's just how it's displayed to the user. And so those are the three types that we have. And video is fairly new. I think it was like 2018 compared to the other one. And Pinterest really wanted to push this because they wanted to keep people on the platform longer. And video on Pinterest works well if it's less than a minute. And it
Mhm.
doesn't always autoplay in your feed and the sound will not be on. So you always have to have captions because the users are less likely to turn their sound on than like another platform because again, they don't want to like be invaded. They just want to like queue it up to see like, is this what I
Mhm.
want? So the standard pin is really like billboard advertising because then you can actually put everything in that pin, not too much, but you can put everything in that format that just kind of teases them out to where then they click to go to your website because that's user behavior. So I think that's why we have these discrepancies also with video pins is you can click to go to the website for sure, but you have to like watch it the whole time and then decide. Whereas like a standard pin is qualified like much quicker for people.
So not just looking at the types of pins, but just looking at themes between the types of content that are performing well on Pinterest right now and the types that aren't. What are those themes? Like if we want to create good content for Pinterest, what are the things that we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, it all depends on the keywords that you're targeting and the audience that you're targeting. So I love that you brought up earlier that whole idea of like what works for one might not work for the other. And I think that's the same thing when it comes to the types of content that are resonating for people and what keyword you're targeting. So Pinterest functions on the same SEO type of model. So not only are they evaluating the algorithm is evaluating the image and what's there, but they're looking at the pin title and the pin description to say, who are we going to show this to? So if Susie, we know she's interested in spring fashion, we're going to pull from anywhere that has anything that talks about spring women's fashion because we know she's interested. So that if Pinterest looks and they see, well, this is getting a lot of engagement, then we're going to show that. And if Susie indicates that she's interested, we'll show more. So I would say types of content is always going to be evergreen and then also seasonal, which I think you can take evergreen, like how to make a sourdough bread, right? Sourdough breads had a moment for like 4 years running. If you can take that, you can talk about like how to reframe sourdough into a Mother's Day brunch just by changing up the image and the keywords where it's going on your website. That doesn't change, but how you're playing to the algorithm on Pinterest, that changes up.
I feel like that's true of other platforms too, right? I think it's very specific on Pinterest and especially looking at like Pinterest trends and stuff like that. They have such great resources on what is trending in that season. But I do think, again, this applies to so many other marketing channels other than Pinterest because content that is very in the moment is, I mean, kind of trendy because I mean, how long is spring trending before we're all on to summer and then something else? But I think it's a good strategy overall, especially knowing that Pinterest content is repurposed, hopefully.
Yeah, not to interrupt you, but you said something that actually like because I was trying to frame up like, okay, the seasonal content component for like Instagram or Facebook. And I think where it differs is that there's a longer runway when it comes to Pinterest. Whereas, you know, we often say if we had to frame up all the social medias like in a line, Pinterest would be back at this like 3 to 6 months in advance. I'm planning for a particular event or party. And then I will go to Amazon or even Google or to that shop once I get close to the date and taking action. And then I will go to Instagram to post like about the event that's happening. But Pinterest just has that longer runway than I think other platforms do.
Yeah, for sure. Don't they say 2 years or is it different now?
Well, in order to plan, I would say shelf life. Yes. Anything, a pin that you would pin can be year over year over year. But before an event, I would say it's up to 3 months. And even Christmas, people are posting about Christmas like in July. And so you can definitely, you know, back it up a little bit. And it doesn't mean you can't post about the event close to the actual date. I would say it just means you want to be conscious of it 6 weeks-ish out from that particular date.
Gotcha. So once you are creating consistent content, how long do you think it takes for a business owner to start seeing consistent results on Pinterest? We were chatting a little bit before we hit play and just taking advantage of personal coaching for my own business here. I feel like I've been doing all the things and checking all the boxes, but Pinterest still isn't doing what I want it to do in terms of driving traffic to my website. And so in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what is the thing that I'm missing? I'm sure like anything, there's no like secret code, but what are your recommendations for one, how long to give it? Because everything takes time. How long do you give Pinterest before you are like, okay, this isn't working? And two, when it's not working, what are the top things that you look at?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll say if you're a new account, it's 6 to 9 months before even a year before you're going to see any forward movement. So that's that right there. If you are an established account, it now goes to looking at your year over year, quarter over quarter traffic. And it's going to be dependent upon what your goals are. So you said the phrase, like, it's not doing what I want it to do. So I think it's really important for every business owner to outline that, to say, this is what I want from Pinterest. And these are the metrics that are going to show me if XYZ is working. So I'll take me as an example. I've used Pinterest for 10 years. And it has ebbed and flowed up and down. And we were getting like 1,000 sessions a month from it right up until the end of this last year. And then January hit and it dropped to like 300. We thought, what is happening? This is really, really strange. And so we took the mindset of getting pretty investigative to say, if Pinterest, we have the goal of driving traffic, growing our email list, and gaining authority in this space, this loss down to 300 is difficult for us. And so what can we do to try to jog that up? And that came to creating a different type of image, targeting new keywords, updating our board names to reflect newer keywords, because we hadn't done that in a couple of years. We'd kind of been riding on this, well, it's working, it's giving us this range of what we want. And then I think we got hit with this weird thing at the beginning of the year, which I will say, number one, is notoriously our lowest traffic time anyway. But we were able to spot that something was wrong because it was lower than the year before. And so now we're going, okay, what are we going to test and we're going to try? And obviously for me, because I'm a person who does Pinterest, I'm not going to give up on it. But if I was a business owner and I had to make a choice, I would look at all the traffic driving sources that I have. And I would ask myself, out of those, where does Pinterest fit in the way of those numbers? So if Google, YouTube, and Pinterest are there, which are our top three, is Pinterest staying level with at least the other socials that I have? Because I think a lot of people go into it and they say, Pinterest is low for me, it's not working for me. But when we pull up the numbers, what we find is that it's Google, Pinterest, and then the floor drops and it's Instagram, Facebook. But they're more likely, without looking at the data, to go, I'm going to lean into Instagram or I'm going to lean into TikTok because I feel like it's doing something. So that's what I would consult somebody to say, like, go back to the data, go back to your yearly reports and say, what is my measuring stick? And sometimes I think with even Google or with even Instagram, the goalpost moves. And that's what's been hard over the last couple of years, is that the threshold was so high and we were going for this. And now with like helpful content updates and all these changes, our threshold, it's lowering. And we see our traffic lowering with it too. And we go, oh, it's not working. But maybe it's the whole ecosystem that's just changed overall. So that's what I would do if I was in somebody's shoes and trying to evaluate whether or not it's working or not working.
So what I'm hearing is that I'm not missing anything. It's just going back to basics and re-optimizing and experimenting and continuing to audit your strategy as your business changes, as the platform changes. But digging into that a little bit further, two things you mentioned were updating keywords and also updating images. And I would love to know your best tips. Keywords is something like SEO that I think has a negative connotation for most business owners, especially creatives who are like, oh my gosh, that sounds so analytical and confusing. So what are your best tips for keeping fresh keywords on Pinterest? And then we'll go into the other question next.
Yeah. So I would say number one is don't overcomplicate it. Like, use the search bar on Pinterest. That's it. Like, it's probably your best tool that you have. I find it less overwhelming than SEO. I was just in like Ahrefs and SEMrush and all those. And I'm like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. Like, I'm out of here. So when it comes to Pinterest, I would look at, okay, what are the things I know that my people would be searching if they're trying to find my content? And I start there. And then I would set a timer, spend an hour. Look on Pinterest, look around at those keywords and see what else is out there. What is Pinterest showing to people? A quick tip too is if you type something in and nothing populates underneath, there's an excellent chance that either Pinterest is deranking that particular keyword or there's just not a search volume for it. So you can double check that by going to trends. That's their other tool that shows you when things are trending on Pinterest. So trends.pinterest.com. Now, here's an interesting thing to note is that it's also helpful for you to know who you're targeting. I love this example was so good from this last week. There's a woman who sells freezer meals. And without skipping a beat, she goes, I have two audiences. I have Gen Z. They're either in college or they're newly moved out. They want to know how they can save money on meals and do freezer meals. And they're coming from Pinterest because Gen Z is using Pinterest. Or I have boomers that are either taking care of themselves or they're taking care of their aging parents and they want to find a way to make meals for their parents. She's like, I don't have the millennials or Gen X in between, but I know these are the two. And I target my images based on those things. Maybe on Gen Z image, it is, are you looking to save money while you're in college on groceries? Or is it how to stretch your budget living with your roommates or something like that? She's still getting them to the same destination, but she's leveraging those keywords both on the image and below to get a different type of audience. And I think that to me is genius of how you leverage keywords and images in a way that doesn't feel super overwhelming, but you as a business owner are responsible to know, who am I talking to? And that makes it way easier from there.
So you got into this a little bit in what you just said, but specifically for people who have blogs or long form content, podcasts, YouTube channels, what are your best recommendations for getting more eyes on your long form content using Pinterest? I know it's similar to other types of content, but specifically for content creators who want to drive traffic to their content, what are the best types of pins to be creating?
Yeah. So I would say right off the bat, you can do 2 to 3 images or pins per blog post. So I'll give you my workflow. So I create a podcast, I convert it into a blog post that's like for SEO, natural sounding, kind of it's not the transcript, right? So then I take from there and I create 2 Pinterest images that have 2 different types of phrases on them. And then I'm sharing that to Pinterest and I'm doing it in a way where I'm dripping it out to all the different boards that I have over a period of time so that I can, hit the algorithm at different times. I think that first pin that you share to Pinterest holds the most value. So if I have a blog post, I just did a podcast about what does the funnel on Pinterest mean? I did it because I didn't know what Pinterest was talking about whenever they said funnel. So I wanted to do it for myself. So then I create a pin image that's like, are you confused by the Pinterest funnel? Or how to understand the Pinterest funnel? It both goes to the same place, a blog post and podcast, so they can see both, but I'm targeting them with different types of phrasing and keywords.
So is that all you're doing? 3 standard, or are you creating more content than that for the one episode?
I'm doing just 3. Yeah. And I'm letting it ride and I'm just kind of seeing what happens. And just recently, actually, as a part of when we saw traffic go down, one of our big takeaways that we had to change up our images and we had to change up what that branding looked like a little bit, maybe what the phrases were going to be. So I have all this old content that's living here, right? So I don't need to create anything new. Now I can just create new images and pin to it and see if that drives a new type of traffic or any kind of new engagement, if you will, on Pinterest.
I feel like that advice is different, definitely stands out from what I've been hearing from a lot of people who talk about Pinterest, who it almost seems like you need to, the more content, the more pins you create for each post, of course, the better they're going to perform. So I'm curious to dig into why only 3?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go into my history nerding out just a little bit, if that's
Perfect.
Okay.
Love it.
Okay. Back in late 2019, early 2020, Pinterest did a webinar with Tailwind where they said this word fresh pin. And they said, we want you to create as many new images as you can, like create new content. I also think the person at Pinterest was confused about how content creators work. And so when she said this, I think what she was trying to get at is more content. We want more content on the platform because the user repins a lot of things. So if you, creator, are funneling into this ecosystem, that's good for you and that's good for us. I think when she said it, she was saying 1 pin image, 1 blog post, new. But how it came out was, oh, you mean we can create all these new images and they will quote unquote look like fresh pins. And then Pinterest will see it that way. And then they'll show it to more people. And so we saw this wave of people that said, I'm going to stop creating content because blog posts are really hard. And I'm just going to make as many images as I can and see if I can drive as much, right? And what we saw with those clients is that when they did that, their traffic went on a steep decline. Like it really did a whole lot of nothing. But the ones who also created newer images, maybe because they were targeting different audiences or they were targeting times of year events, but they were also creating at least one new post a week, they saw a steady increase, not a hockey stick up and to the right, but they were a healthy rate of growth. And so there became this kind of, I guess the fervent thing of like, I want to create so many fresh pins that still lives out there, but they're missing the point of what I think Pinterest wants, which is we want new content to fuel the users on our platform. So we do 3 because that's easy for us. And we don't want to do any more than that. And it gives us the opportunity to look at our analytics later and do easier testing. Like, I don't want to do anything that's harder for me. So 25 images for each weekly blog post feels like overwhelming. And then some people get into that, like, well, I'm just going to move an image or I'm going to swap a line or I'm going to add an emoji or I'm going to do these things. And it really is not getting to like, you're not getting the most bang for your buck. And I would want people to work smarter, not harder or longer. So let's really get creative with these 3 and just see what we can do with them.
So I love this, obviously, because this is the Business Minimalist podcast, and I'm obsessed with finding those trends of where less can be better. And so this is the perfect example of that. But you mentioned like do 3 and then test and come back and then create new ones when you need fresh images to drive traffic to that same content. So how often are you going back into your archives? Because you have a lot of content and blog posts and podcasts now. Are you going back like after a year to create 3 more images, or what does it look like for you to create more content to drive traffic to old posts?
Yeah. So only if we're seeing that either something definitely fell flat or it did well and we want to give it a secondary boost. So one of the posts that's always done well for me, it took off in 2017, was how to clean up Pinterest boards. And what we did was we created multiple spinoffs of content and podcasts like, okay, how to spring clean, how to create a system for a yearly audit of your Pinterest account. We kind of spun it off from there, but this main one always does the best. And so then what we do is actually right now is when it usually takes off. We're going to create new images for it again. And we're going to see, do those also rise in the rank of analytics? Like, do we see them rise up to the top within the last 30 days? Because in Pinterest analytics, you can look at that. And so that's really the only time if we see something's doing really well and it maybe has an older image, we want to test it and see if that new image kind of takes off as well. Or we thought something would do really well and it didn't. Okay, let's look at our analytics over the last year. What do we want to try again? Let's try a new image for that.
I mean, I know that your podcast is the Simple Pin podcast, but I really do feel like throughout this conversation, you've just really simplified what it means to be on Pinterest for me. So I really, really appreciate that. And there have been so many good nuggets in this episode. I want to close on, you mentioned Pinterest is changing all the time, like any other platform. And I would love to know from an insider, someone who's really aware of what's happening with Pinterest behind the scenes, what changes do you anticipate happening on Pinterest in the next year?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say I'll start with what I don't think will change, and then I'll go in from there. I think that the things that are true to the core of Pinterest is 1, they run on a keyword algorithm. 2, they run on images. And 3, the nature of how they work is people click and they leave. As much as Pinterest hates that, that's just how it works. And when they introduced idea pins, 2 years ago and they didn't have a link, they frustrated the main user base, right? They were like, this is the thing that I hate on Pinterest. And you just added that in, which is why they've now pulled back. So those 3 things won't change. I think the things that will change, I think it's going to be what keywords or how do they keep Pinterest a positive place? How do they target Gen Z? I don't think their pin formats are really changing. I think if any of the changes that we see will be how people are leveraging ads, what type of ads platforms they have, or, models do they use? I would say also what keywords are going to be ranking high, which ones are they going to demote, especially if you're in the fashion space or the makeup space. I see in the clothing space, I think we see the most changes with body type and inclusivity and diversity. That's where I see the most changes. But other than that, the only thing I think they might introduce that they've been hinting around about is an on-platform checkout, but they've tried it in the past. So there's a lot of shop integrations when it comes to like verified merchant, or you can see product pins. They're very good integrations if you're a shop owner. I do think they've always wanted to have a point of sale on the platform. But again, whenever they've tried it, it's just not worked. But their new CEO is from Google Commerce, PayPal, Venmo background. And so what you see him going towards is really honing in on this being the great originator of things you're going to purchase. And that's the great informer Pinterest is. And so I think that I'm really hoping their ads managers get better. That's I don't think that will change, but I really hope it does, because I think their ads product is good, but their ads managers are more like ads salespeople. They're just not good. So I kind of really hope that they will help people see how to marry organic and paid together.
Well, that is a very hopeful prediction. Those all sound like great changes to me.
Yeah.
Going in the right direction. Yeah. Fingers crossed. Yep. Would you be up for a bonus round?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I was just saying before we hit record that there's a whole other side to your business where you teach people how to scale agencies, and you're an agency owner yourself. So you might have to come back and we'll have an episode all about that. But for the bonus round, I would love to ask you some like businessy productivity related questions just to get a little insight behind the scenes into what it looks like for you to scale a business. So the first question is, what is your favorite productivity hack as a business owner?
Oh, timers. I'm a huge fan of turning everything off, set a timer on my phone. It's never more than 50 minutes, but I turn everything off, go deep. That's the best.
50 minutes is a sweet spot for you?
Yeah, I would even say if it's less or I have less time, I'll do 20 minutes. But I find that if it's like a bigger project where I know I'm going to be using a lot of creative energy, but I need to be productive with it, I tend to give myself a longer period of time and just completely put in my earbuds and then put on music that doesn't have any words, set my timer and go for it.
I've been surprised by how many people have said that, actually, because this is a common question that I ask, but timers are like the go-to productivity hack for a lot of business owners.
Yeah.
The second one is, what is your favorite business book to recommend?
I have loved the book E-Myth. Like, it revolutionized the way I saw business. Somebody recommended it to me. I think it was year 2 in business. And it just, I actually thought last week it's an excellent book.
I have not read it. It's on my list. I think I have 300 and something books on my to read list on Goodreads right now. So I'll get to it eventually.
It's really good. And a bonus one, if you have a team, the book, The Ideal Team Player by Patrick Lencioni is excellent. We framed up a lot of our team growth on it. It's just so, so good and a quick and easy read.
I've never heard of that one before. I've heard of Patrick's writing. What is his book that's really popular?
Is it The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Okay. That one's great. And he has a new one out, I think, called The Motive. I haven't read it yet, but I like his because they're written in like a fiction model. And then they give the practical stuff at the end. And it's just like, you could power through his book I'm not a fast reader, in like 2 days.
Awesome. I'm also into audiobooks too right now. I feel like between the library and Spotify Premium now has 15 hours free and Audible credits, I'm like cranking through them this year.
Ooh,
so good to know. You've already given me 4 to add to my list. So let's stop there. And then the last question is, for those who want to get acquainted with, Pinterest and building an agency and all of the content that you have to share, where's the best place to find you after the show?
simplepinmedia.com would be the best.
Perfect. And all the links I'm sure are there, and we can link the podcast. Like I said, it's been a great resource for me. I have loved listening to it. There's so much helpful information on there as well. So if you love this episode, definitely go check out her podcast because there's so much more, but we'll make sure all of that is linked in the show notes. So thank you so much again, Kate, for being here. This was great.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Edit podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd be so grateful if you take a screenshot and share it on Instagram, tagging me at jadeboyd.co. I'm on a mission to empower a new generation of women to become the types of wives, moms, and business owners that they've always wanted to be. Because empowered women change their families and communities for the better, and this is how we'll change the world. Sharing your takeaways from this episode on Instagram will help more women in business discover helpful episodes and level up in life and business each week. Don't forget to check out the show notes for the tools and resources mentioned in today's episode, because good ideas don't grow businesses. Action does. I'll see you next time on the Business Edit podcast. The number of women burning out is at an all-time high right now, and I'm on a mission to change that. If you're a service provider who's feeling overwhelmed, overworked, and underpaid, don't let another year go by staying stuck. The Business Edit is a 12-month group coaching program that helps you declutter your business from top to bottom so that you can have shorter to-do lists, a clear strategy to scale, and know exactly what to focus on each week to drive results in your business. You'll end the year with the business that you've been dreaming of building, one that gives you your life back and pays you more than you ever made before. In the program, you'll follow my signature 5-step method for scaling your service-based business. You'll get business minimalist strategy, marketing, systems, and productivity roadmaps that are simple to understand and easy to implement. Plus, 12 months of customized one-on-one coaching to help you every step of the way. Join me inside the Business Edit at www.jadeboyd.co/coaching and get my step-by-step blueprint with everything you need to build your dream business in 2024. Now back to the show.